Ladies and gentlemen, today I am going to talk about one of Kenya's most infamous prisons, Kamiti Maximum Security Prison. Known for its harsh conditions, notorious inmates, and dark history, Kamiti has been at the center of Kenya's penal system for decades. Kamiti Maximum Security Prison, located in Kiambu County, near Nairobi, Kenya, has a long and complex history dating back to the British colonial period. It was originally built in the 1950s when Kenya was still under British rule, and it played a crucial role during the Mau Mau Uprising, a significant movement against colonial oppression. During this time, the British colonial administration used Kamiti as a detention center for suspected Mau Mau fighters, many of whom were subjected to harsh treatment, forced labor, and even execution. The prison was strategically built on 1,200 acres of land, much of which was initially used for agriculture. This allowed prisoners to work on farms within the prison compound, growing food that would sustain both inmates and prison officers. However, the large land area also made security a challenge, leading to various escape attempts throughout the prison's history. After Kenya gained independence in 1963, Kamiti continued to serve as a maximum security prison, housing some of the country's most dangerous criminals and political prisoners. Throughout the late 20th century, it became synonymous with brutality, overcrowding, and poor living conditions. Many individuals accused of opposing the government were also detained at Kamiti, especially during the regimes of Jomo Kenyatta and Daniel Arap Moi. These political prisoners often faced torture, solitary confinement, and extreme hardship, further solidifying Kamiti's reputation as a place of suffering. By the 1990s, reports of human rights violations within Kamiti began to emerge more frequently, drawing attention from local and international organizations. Investigations revealed that inmates lived in inhumane conditions, with many being denied medical care, adequate food, and proper sanitation. Overcrowding became an increasing problem, as the prison, initially designed for about 1,400 prisoners, was forced to accommodate thousands more. Despite numerous reform efforts, Kamiti has remained a symbol of Kenya's troubled prison system. Over the decades, it has continued to house high-profile criminals, including terrorists, serial killers, and corrupt officials. The prison's history is deeply intertwined with Kenya's political, social, and legal evolution, making it one of the most infamous correctional facilities in East Africa. Kamiti Maximum Security Prison has long been home to some of Kenya's most dangerous and infamous criminals, including murderers, serial killers, terrorists, political prisoners, and high-profile corrupt officials. Over the decades, it has gained a fearsome reputation as the final destination for individuals convicted of the most heinous crimes in the country. Many inmates sent to Kamiti have either spent the rest of their lives behind bars or faced execution within its walls. One of the most notorious criminals held at Kamiti was Wakaku, Wanagu, and Rasta, a gang of ruthless criminals responsible for violent robberies and murders in the 1990s. These criminals terrorized Kenya for years, and their names became synonymous with fear and lawlessness. Although they were eventually killed in police shootouts, their accomplices and followers found themselves locked away in Kamiti for life. Another infamous case is that of Philip Onyenka, a self-confessed serial killer who shocked the nation when he admitted to murdering over 17 people, mostly women and children. His chilling confessions about being part of a cult that demanded human sacrifices left the public horrified. Although he was arrested and detained at Kamiti, his trial and the legal battles surrounding his case drew significant public and media attention. Kamiti has also held several terrorists, particularly those linked to Al-Shabaab, a militant group responsible for major attacks in Kenya, including the Westgate Mall attack in 2013 and the Garissa University massacre in 2015. Many of these convicted terrorists are serving long sentences or facing capital punishment within Kamiti's heavily guarded walls. The presence of such dangerous individuals has made security a top concern, and authorities have had to implement strict surveillance measures to prevent radicalization and prison escapes. Apart from criminals, Kamiti has a long history of holding political prisoners. During the regimes of Jomo Kenyatta and Daniel Arap Moi, many opposition leaders, activists, and journalists who spoke against government policies were imprisoned at Kamiti. Some were detained without trial for years, enduring harsh treatment, torture, and inhumane conditions. Notable figures, including Koigi wa Wamwere, a former Kenyan politician and human rights activist, were held at Kamiti for opposing the government. Kamiti is also notorious for being one of the few prisons in Kenya where executions were carried out. During the 20th century, many prisoners convicted of murder, armed robbery, and treason were hanged within Kamiti's execution chambers. The most infamous executions took place in the 1980s and 1990s, including the hanging of Senior Private Hezekiah Ochuka, the mastermind behind the 1982 attempted coup against President Daniel Arap Moi. Although Kenya officially placed a moratorium on the death penalty in 1987, meaning that no executions have been carried out since then, Kamiti still holds prisoners sentenced to death, many of whom have had their sentences converted to life imprisonment. The prison remains one of the most feared correctional facilities in East Africa, known for housing individuals who have left a dark mark on Kenya's criminal history. Kamiti Maximum Security Prison is infamous for its harsh, inhumane, and degrading living conditions, which have been widely condemned by human rights organizations. Despite being one of Kenya's largest prisons, it has suffered from severe overcrowding, poor sanitation, inadequate health care, and rampant abuse for decades. These conditions have made it a living nightmare for thousands of inmates who are often forced to endure extreme suffering on a daily basis. One of the biggest issues at Kamiti is overcrowding. The prison was originally built to accommodate around 1,400 inmates, but over time, it has housed more than 4,000 prisoners, sometimes even exceeding 5,000. This extreme congestion means that cells meant for a few inmates often hold dozens, with prisoners forced to sleep on dirty, cold floors due to a lack of beds or mattresses. Some cells are so packed that prisoners must take turns sleeping, while others sleep sitting or standing. The situation is worsened by poor sanitation. The prison lacks a proper sewage system, and due to limited access to clean water, many inmates are unable to bathe regularly or wash their clothes. The few available toilets are filthy, broken, and often overflowing, forcing prisoners to use plastic bags or small containers. This has led to the spread of diseases such as dysentery, cholera, and skin infections, which often go untreated due to the lack of medical care. Health conditions at Kamiti are deplorable. There is a chronic shortage of medical staff, medicine, and proper healthcare facilities within the prison. Many inmates suffer from HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, respiratory infections, and other chronic diseases, but they rarely receive proper treatment. The prison hospital is understaffed and poorly equipped, meaning that even those suffering from serious illnesses might never receive medical attention. Many prisoners die from preventable diseases, while others weaken over time due to malnutrition and untreated infections. Food is another major problem in Kamiti. The prison provides inmates with low-quality, poorly cooked, and nutritionally inadequate meals. Prisoners often eat a basic diet of maize meal, ugali, and boiled beans, which lacks essential nutrients. Reports indicate that some prisoners go days without eating a proper meal, and due to shortages and corruption, some inmates bribe prison staff just to receive extra food. Malnutrition is common, with prisoners losing extreme amounts of weight, making them more vulnerable to diseases. Kamiti is also known for extreme violence and abuse. Reports of beatings, torture, and sexual violence by both prison guards and fellow inmates are common. Some prison officers are notorious for brutally punishing inmates, using whips, batons, and even electrocution devices to maintain order. Corrupt wardens sometimes sell protection to wealthier prisoners, leaving the poorest and weakest inmates vulnerable to extortion, assault, and even death. Adding to these horrors, the mental health of prisoners is largely ignored. Many inmates suffer from depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, but there are no proper mental health services available. Some prisoners become suicidal, while others develop severe mental disorders due to the brutal conditions they experience daily. Despite efforts to improve conditions, Kamiti remains one of the most feared prisons in Africa, where survival often depends on luck, strength, and connections rather than justice or rehabilitation. Kamiti Maximum Security Prison, despite being one of the most heavily guarded prisons in Kenya, has a long history of jailbreaks, escape attempts, and corruption scandals that have exposed the weaknesses within the country's prison system. These incidents often involve dangerous criminals, corrupt prison officers, and organized escape networks, making Kamiti a place where even the most secure cells cannot always guarantee confinement. One of the most shocking jailbreaks occurred in November 2021, when 3 high-profile terrorists managed to escape from Kamiti despite its strict surveillance and reinforced security measures. The escapees, all convicted of terrorism-related offenses, took advantage of inside help from corrupt prison officers, allowing them to slip past multiple security layers. This incident sent shockwaves across Kenya, prompting a nationwide manhunt. The 3 men were later recaptured in Kitui County, but their escape exposed serious loopholes in Kamiti's security system, leading to the dismissal and arrest of several prison officials. Over the years, Kamiti has witnessed several other escape attempts, some of which have been successful, while others have ended in death for fleeing inmates. In most cases, escapes involve digging tunnels, cutting through weak prison bars, or bribing guards to look the other way. Some prisoners have even faked illnesses to be transferred to hospitals, where they attempt to escape. In one instance, an inmate dressed as a visitor and walked out of the prison gates undetected, highlighting the level of negligence and corruption among prison staff. Corruption within Kamiti is deeply rooted, with some prison officers engaging in illegal activities, including smuggling contraband, facilitating escapes, and extorting inmates and their families. Many prisoners have access to mobile phones, drugs, and even weapons, despite strict rules prohibiting them. Investigations have revealed that prison staff accept bribes to allow inmates to use phones to communicate with criminal networks outside, some of which are involved in fraud, kidnappings, and assassinations. One of the most infamous corruption cases linked to Kamiti involved a fake gold scam, where prisoners inside the jail were found to be orchestrating multi-million-dollar fraud schemes using mobile phones. Wealthy businessmen and foreign investors were targeted, tricked into believing they were buying large quantities of gold, only to realize they had been conned by criminals operating from inside Kamiti. This scandal raised questions about how inmates gained access to phones and internet services, once again exposing gaps in security and the influence of corrupt prison staff. Another disturbing issue is the sale of protection and privileges within Kamiti. Wealthier prisoners can pay bribes to receive better food, private cells, access to visitors, and even early releases through manipulated paperwork. In contrast, poorer inmates suffer brutal treatment and are often left to survive in terrible conditions without any form of protection. Some reports indicate that prisoners pay wardens to avoid torture or being assigned dangerous tasks in the prison's harsh environment. The Kenyan government has tried to crack down on corruption at Kamiti, but challenges remain. Several prison officers have been arrested and fired for corruption, but new cases keep emerging, showing how deeply entrenched the problem is. With insider help, Kamiti remains vulnerable to further breakouts, organized crime, and continued corruption, making it a major concern for the country's criminal justice system. Despite its notorious reputation for harsh conditions, corruption, and violent inmates, Kamiti Maximum Security Prison has also been the focus of various rehabilitation and reform programs aimed at transforming prisoners into productive members of society. These programs, introduced by the Kenyan government, religious organizations, and nonprofit groups, seek to provide inmates with education, vocational training, psychological support, and religious guidance in an effort to reduce recidivism and promote reintegration into society. However, challenges remain in making these programs effective for all prisoners. One of the most significant rehabilitation initiatives at Kamiti is education and literacy programs. Many inmates enter prison with little to no formal education, making it difficult for them to rebuild their lives upon release. To address this, several organizations have launched adult literacy classes, allowing inmates to learn how to read and write while serving their sentences. In some cases, prisoners have even sat for Kenya Certificate of Primary Education, KCP, and Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education, KCSE, exams, achieving impressive results despite studying under difficult conditions. A few inmates have managed to pursue university degrees through distance learning programs, proving that education can be a powerful tool for transformation. Apart from academics, Kamiti has also introduced vocational training programs designed to equip inmates with practical skills that can help them find employment after their release. These include carpentry, tailoring, welding, farming, and mechanics, among other trades. Some prisoners undergo training in handcrafts, making items such as furniture, clothing, and artwork, which are later sold to the public to generate income for both the inmates and the prison system. Such initiatives not only keep prisoners engaged, but also give them a sense of purpose and self-sufficiency, reducing their chances of reverting to crime once they are freed. Another key aspect of rehabilitation at Kamiti is psychological and behavioral counseling. Many inmates suffer from mental health issues, drug addiction, and trauma, either due to their criminal past or the harsh experiences within the prison. Programs focusing on anger management, conflict resolution, and substance abuse recovery have been introduced to help prisoners cope with their emotions and make better choices. However, due to limited resources, only a fraction of inmates can access these services, leaving many without proper psychological support. Religious organizations also play a crucial role in rehabilitation at Kamiti. Christian and Islamic groups regularly conduct prayer sessions, Bible studies, and Quranic teachings, aiming to guide inmates towards spiritual healing and moral reformation. Some prisoners claim that religious teachings have helped them abandon criminal behavior and seek redemption, with a few even becoming preachers and mentors to fellow inmates. These faith-based programs also offer emotional and social support, especially for prisoners who have been abandoned by their families. In recent years, Kamiti has experimented with restorative justice programs, where prisoners engage in dialogues with their victims or their families in an attempt to seek forgiveness and rebuild relationships. This approach, though not widely implemented, has shown promising results in reducing hostility and helping inmates take responsibility for their actions. Some prisoners have expressed genuine remorse, while others have been able to reconnect with their families, giving them a better chance of reintegrating into society after their release. Despite these efforts, rehabilitation at Kamiti faces many obstacles. The lack of funding, overcrowded prison conditions, and corruption often hinder the success of these programs. Many prisoners who wish to change their lives struggle to access education and training opportunities, while others fall back into criminal behavior due to lack of post-release support. For rehabilitation to be truly effective, there needs to be greater investment in resources, better trained prison staff, and stronger partnerships between the government and external organizations. Kamiti Maximum Security Prison has been the subject of intense international scrutiny and criticism due to its inhumane conditions and frequent violations of human rights. Over the years, various global human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the United Nations, have raised concerns about the prison's treatment of inmates, the overcrowded and unsanitary conditions, and the systemic abuse faced by those incarcerated. These organizations have called on the Kenyan government to make substantial reforms in the prison system to ensure that prisoners are treated with dignity and respect in accordance with international human rights standards. One of the most significant issues that international bodies have highlighted is overcrowding. Kamiti, designed to house approximately 1,400 inmates, often holds more than 4,000 prisoners, putting immense pressure on already deteriorating infrastructure. This overcrowding not only leads to inadequate living space for prisoners, but also places a severe strain on sanitation, healthcare, and food provisions. The prison's unsanitary conditions, including dirty cells, lack of access to clean drinking water, and overflowing toilets, are violations of the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners, also known as the Nelson Mandela Rules. These international guidelines emphasize that prisoners should be held in conditions that respect their dignity, but Kamity's environment has been described as dehumanizing. In addition to the poor physical conditions, reports of torture, ill treatment, and abuse by prison guards have attracted the attention of human rights groups. Prison officers at Kamiti have been accused of using brutal tactics to enforce discipline, including physical beatings, verbal abuse, and solitary confinement. Some prisoners have reported sexual violence at the hands of guards, while others claim that prison officers often extort money from inmates in exchange for protection or privileges. The lack of accountability for these abuses has made it difficult to combat these issues, leading to the continuous suffering of many prisoners. International concerns have also centered around inadequate access to health care. Kamiti has been accused of failing to provide inmates with adequate medical attention, leaving many to suffer from preventable diseases. The overcrowded nature of the prison increases the spread of contagious diseases such as tuberculosis, HIV, AIDS, and malaria, which have become rampant in the prison population. Despite this, there are severe shortages of medical supplies, and inmates with serious medical conditions often go untreated for long periods. Human rights groups have called for better medical facilities, including the provision of trained healthcare staff, to ensure that prisoners receive necessary treatment and care. The international community's concern has been compounded by prison escapes, which have become increasingly common despite Kamiti being a high-security facility. These jailbreaks often involve organized crime syndicates, political figures, or terrorist networks, and have exposed the corruption within the prison system. Reports have surfaced that prison officers have been bribed to allow dangerous criminals to escape or to facilitate illegal activities within the prison. These escapes have made Kenya's prison system a point of concern for both local and international law enforcement agencies, as they raise questions about the effectiveness of the prison's security measures and the integrity of prison staff. In addition to these human rights violations, political prisoners have been a major point of contention for international observers. Kamiti has been known to hold individuals who have been politically persecuted, especially during periods of political unrest in Kenya. Many critics argue that these individuals are detained without trial, often on politically motivated charges, and subjected to harsh conditions simply for opposing the government. Human rights organizations have repeatedly condemned the detention of political dissidents in unlawful conditions as a clear violation of freedom of expression and the right to a fair trial. The attention from international human rights organizations has led to some pressure on the Kenyan government to address these issues. However, reform efforts have been slow, and many argue that there is little political will to implement substantial changes. While the Kenyan government has acknowledged the need for reform, including attempts to improve inmate rehabilitation and reduce overcrowding, critics argue that these efforts remain insufficient and largely ineffective. In 2020, the Kenyan government did launch a program to decongest prisons by releasing low-risk inmates, but this measure failed to address the underlying systemic issues plaguing Kamiti and other correctional facilities across the country. Furthermore, global human rights activists have called on Kenya's international partners, such as donor countries and international aid organizations, to provide support for prison reforms. This includes offering technical expertise, financial resources, and assistance in training prison staff to handle inmates humanely and improve conditions. However, the response from the international community has often been limited, as many believe that Kenya must take primary responsibility for making meaningful changes to its prison system. In conclusion, the international spotlight on Kamiti has served as an important reminder of the need for comprehensive reform within Kenya's prison system. As one of the most notorious prisons in Africa, Kamiti remains a symbol of the deep challenges that the country faces in ensuring that justice is carried out in a manner that respects human dignity. The ongoing efforts to reform the prison, improve conditions, and hold accountable those responsible for the mistreatment of inmates will continue to face intense scrutiny from both local and international observers. Kamiti Maximum Security Prison plays a pivotal role in Kenya's criminal justice system, serving as both a punitive institution and an important symbol of the state's efforts to maintain law and order. As the country's most notorious high-security facility, Kamiti is tasked with housing some of the most dangerous criminals in Kenya, including individuals convicted of terrorism, murder, organized crime, and corruption. Its position as the main institution for high-risk offenders underscores its significance in the broader framework of criminal justice and public safety in Kenya. However, while it holds a central role in incarcerating offenders, the prison's effectiveness in rehabilitating prisoners and ensuring justice has been called into question over the years. Kamiti is an essential part of Kenya's penal system, designed to house individuals whose crimes have been deemed too severe to be dealt with in lesser institutions. The prison's security protocols are intended to prevent escapes and maintain order, ensuring that those who commit violent offenses or pose significant threats to national security remain incarcerated. Within the prison's walls, offenders are segregated based on their criminal classifications, with terrorists, gangsters, and political prisoners often housed in different sections. This separation is meant to minimize the potential for violence and prevent the radicalization of certain groups. Kamiti's role in the criminal justice system extends beyond mere containment. As a high-security prison, it is responsible for enforcing the punishments handed down by Kenya's courts. For those sentenced to death, Kamiti has been a site for executions, even though capital punishment was officially abolished in practice in the 1980s. Many death row inmates have spent decades in the prison awaiting final judgments or clemency from the president, making the prison a symbol of the controversial nature of the death penalty in Kenya. Inmates awaiting execution often live in conditions that reflect the uncertainty of their fate, with long periods of isolation and limited access to legal counsel or visitors. Kamiti also serves as a critical component of Kenya's efforts to combat organized crime and terrorism. In the past decade, the prison has housed several individuals connected to the Al-Shabaab militant group, which has been responsible for some of the most devastating terrorist attacks in Kenya. The prison's ability to contain such high-profile prisoners has been tested repeatedly, with several attempts at radicalization and violent uprisings within the facility. Kamiti has become a focal point in Kenya's counterterrorism strategy, with specialized units being deployed to monitor the activities of certain inmates who might be plotting attacks or recruiting others within the prison system. This aspect of Kamiti's role in Kenya's criminal justice system reflects the ongoing threat of terrorism within the country and the need for constant vigilance in securing high-risk offenders. In the broader context of rehabilitation, Kamiti's role is more ambiguous. While the government has made efforts to improve its rehabilitation programs, these initiatives often fall short due to the overcrowded conditions, lack of resources, and insufficient trained staff. Although there are programs designed to offer vocational training, education, and psychosocial support, the effectiveness of these programs is hindered by the harsh living conditions in the prison and the overwhelming number of inmates. Many prisoners fail to benefit fully from these rehabilitation opportunities, which reduces their chances of successfully reintegrating into society upon release. Moreover, Kamiti's role in reintegration and post-release monitoring has come under increasing scrutiny. While efforts have been made to offer inmates opportunities for vocational training and education, there remains a significant gap in post-release support systems. Inmates often leave Kamiti with little to no resources to help them reintegrate into society, facing the challenges of finding employment, reconnecting with family, and adjusting to life outside prison walls. Without adequate reintegration programs, many prisoners released from Kamiti are at a high risk of reoffending, further straining Kenya's criminal justice system. Furthermore, Kamiti's role in the justice system has been deeply shaped by its relationship with political power and corruption. Over the years, the prison has been used as a site for the detention of political prisoners, especially during the reigns of Presidents Jomo Kenyatta and Daniel Arap Moi. Many opposition figures and activists who challenged government policies found themselves imprisoned in Kamiti, often on trumped-up charges. This politicization of the prison system has led to concerns about the lack of fair trials and the misuse of prisons for political purposes. Even today, critics argue that Kamiti and other Kenyan prisons continue to be used as tools of political repression, with some individuals imprisoned on questionable charges for criticizing the government. In recent years, there have been attempts to reform the Kenyan prison system, with a focus on improving conditions and promoting rehabilitation. However, these efforts have often been met with slow progress and resistance due to the lack of resources and the entrenched political and institutional challenges facing the correctional system. Kamiti, as the epicenter of Kenya's penal system, faces the brunt of these challenges as the country struggles to balance the needs for justice, security, and rehabilitation within its prison system. In conclusion, Kamiti Maximum Security Prison remains a cornerstone of Kenya's criminal justice system, tasked with the dual responsibility of containing dangerous criminals and promoting the rehabilitation of offenders. Despite the challenges it faces in providing adequate care, rehabilitation, and post-release support, Kamiti continues to function as a key institution in Kenya's efforts to maintain public safety and ensure that justice is served. However, the prison's future effectiveness will depend on the ability of the Kenyan government to address the systemic issues within the prison system, improve conditions, and provide more support for inmates' reintegration into society. Kamiti's role in the criminal justice system will continue to evolve, but it will undoubtedly remain at the center of debates surrounding justice, punishment, and reform in Kenya. In conclusion, Kamiti Maximum Security Prison remains a critical element of Kenya's criminal justice system, embodying both its strengths and its struggles. As one of the country's most notorious institutions, it is tasked with handling some of the most dangerous criminals, while also working toward the rehabilitation of offenders. However, it is clear that Kamiti's role in protecting society, ensuring justice, and fostering rehabilitation remains complicated by overcrowded conditions, corruption, and insufficient resources. While efforts have been made to reform the prison, significant challenges persist, particularly in providing adequate education, healthcare, and post-release support. Moving forward, Kenya's success in transforming Kamiti into an institution that truly rehabilitates, rather than just incarcerates, will rely on commitment to long-term reform, increased investment in resources, and a focus on addressing human rights violations. Ultimately, Kamiti's evolution is a microcosm of the broader challenges facing Kenya's criminal justice system, and its future will depend on a comprehensive approach that balances security, justice, and human dignity.